Okay, why don't we go ahead and get started? So hello, everybody, and welcome. I'm Dr. Meg Bouffier. You know me as the creator of the library of NIH grantsmanship courses that you all have access to. I have over 30 years of experience at NIH as a grantee, an intramural researcher, a staff writer, and now a full-time NIH grant mentor. And I've helped clients land nearly $500 million in federal funding. So I'm here to answer your questions about NIH grant applications. So grab a cup of coffee and let's get started. If you're attending live, I want to remind you that you're on listen-only mode. You can type in questions whenever you want into the Q&A box on this platform. And if you're watching this as a recording, just a disclaimer that you should check the date of the recording. The information that I give in this recording was true as of today, and today is November 30th, 2022, but things change very quickly at NIH. So whatever I say in this recording, you should probably check the NIH website to make sure it's still correct when you're watching the recording. So let's talk about a few informational things, what you should be viewing in the library now. So everybody on this call has access to the library of courses, or at least some of the courses. I would recommend, we are in almost in early December already. So if you're targeting the cycle 1 deadlines in February and March, you should probably at this point be done with Master the R series preparation, or the K equivalent of that, and be moving on to watching part 2, how to write the specific aims, and part 3, how to write the significance and innovation sections. I also want to remind people that tomorrow, is that right? Tomorrow, yeah, it's tomorrow. At noon Eastern time, I am giving a half-day live stream of Master the R series. So if anybody's interested in that, all of you can attend without paying, because this is a service that we provide to our members. So if you haven't gotten notices about that, or you just haven't gotten around to registering, please go ahead and do so. If you don't know where to register, contact Erin at megbouffier.com, and she will register you tomorrow morning for the live stream. I think she's out this afternoon, but she'll be able to register you first thing in the morning. So again, that's a half-day live stream free to you that starts tomorrow, December 1st at noon Eastern time. It goes for about 4.5 hours, but that includes breaks. So, you know, that we'll be walking our way through the 4 parts of Master the R series. And the talks are a little bit updated from the recorded versions. I can't keep my hands off these talks. I'm constantly updating them and trying to make them more efficient and effective and up to date. So they'll be a little more timely than the recorded version from May. So in terms of updates from NIH, I think I mentioned this on a previous AGE, but I just want to mention again that NIH has once again extended its pandemic policy, whereby they will allow preliminary data to be submitted as post-submission material. So for those who don't know, post-submission material are updates to your application that you can give to the Center for Scientific Review after you upload up until 30 days before the study section meets. You can only upload once, and you can only upload a single page, and there's no set form. I think it's just a page of information. The types of information that are allowed are very specific. So it tends to be things like updates to publications. So if you have something that is in press, 6 weeks before the study section meets, you can upload that information. During the pandemic, NIH has allowed preliminary data to be submitted as post-submission material as well. And they've already announced that they're going to allow that again on the upcoming cycle. So just know that that is the case. The other big thing is that for the upcoming deadlines, any deadlines for January 25th or after, we're going to be in a new form set. So remember, this is Forms H now. So check the expiration dates on all your forms. It's usually in the upper right-hand corner of the federal forms, and make sure you're working off of the new form set. The major change is to the data and safety management policy. So I actually want to share something that NIH just came out with it, in my opinion, hilarious. So I am going to just share this screen for a moment. So let's see, stop share. Let me make sure I'm sharing the right one. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so are you guys seeing 12 days of data management and sharing tips and resources? Is that what's showing up for you guys? Yep, okay. So this just came out. Clearly somebody at NIH had a little time on their hands, but I think this is hilarious. So we had, if you're unsure about this new data management and sharing policy, we had a guest about a month ago, I think it was, who attended, a colleague of mine who attended NIH's seminar on this new policy, and she put together a very brief presentation with take-home messages about what this policy entails. So if you didn't attend that, I encourage you to go check that out on YouTube, because it was a really quick overview, which is kind of what we all need right now because everybody's pressed for time. But anyway, this has all these funny hyperlinks, a one-page flyer on the who, what, where, when, a two-part webinar series, 3 key steps. So I thought this was really funny and really effective. And so I am going to put that URL in the chat for you guys. Let's see, to everybody. Okay, so that URL is now in the chat for you. Okay. Okay, so I would like to do the tutorial now. So we're going to talk about how to write a team table, because people should be kind of getting close to working on their approach section. So you're going to be thinking about putting together an effective team table. So I'm going to share that screen in mission control here in my world of multiple screens. So hopefully right now you're seeing this green banner that says team table sample. Is everybody seeing that? Okay, great. Okay, so this is very formulaic. So, and I apologize if I'm looking off to the side, but I'm looking at, I have many monitors here and I'm looking over at a different monitor on the side here. So I always encourage people to include a team table that has this structure so that you're sure not to miss any information. And I got to tell you, this is a really common thing that I see on summary statements. I had a number of calls this morning reviewing summary statements with clients, and one of them, every reviewer said repeatedly, it's not clear to us who is doing what. So if you follow this table, that will clear that up. So let's start at the top here. One of the key pieces of information that you need to include, especially at the R01 level, is that the team has published together already, that it is not a novel collaboration. At the R01 level, your team needs to be an experienced team that has successfully published together already. If not, that is, in my experience, a deal breaker at the R01 level. The team has to have published together in the past, or at least some of them have to have published together. You don't necessarily have to have the entire team having published together, but the PI should have published with most of the people on the team, and team members should have published with each other, at least in smaller groups on some publications. So include that in the legend here and make sure that you give the citations. Next, make sure you include people's degrees. So don't just say Dr. So-and-so. I find it as a reviewer really helpful to know if a person's expertise is clinical, are they PhDs, what exactly are they? Next, I always say where they're from. So if, obviously this is an anonymized sample, courtesy of my daughter. If they all come from the same organization, you can just say in the table legend, all team members come from University of Massachusetts or whatever it is. Or like if all but one come from the same university, you could say they all come from University of Massachusetts, except where indicated. And then you would just say the one person who comes from another organization. The next thing is make sure you say what their role is on the project, if they're a multi-PI or a consultant or a co-investigator. NIH has a website that describes these roles if you're unsure, but this is all tied to percent effort. So the PI or the multi-PIs, if you have more than one, should have significant percent effort. So usually those are people who are up around 30, 40% in their percent effort. Co-investigators are key personnel who contribute significantly in terms of the ideas of the project. They're not just lending techniques, but they're actually contributing intellectually to the design and the execution of the project. And co-Is can have percent efforts that are kind of all over the place. You know, it could be 10%, 20, 25, somewhere in there. And these are just really broad brushstrokes. So it's roles, percent effort, and budget are all tied together. And I actually don't work on budget. So you want to work closely with your budget person at your pre-award support office on this. Consultants tend to be people who are probably not contributing intellectually to the design of the project, but are contributing maybe like samples or one type of technique or, you know, something very discrete. They're not really involved in the intellectual design and execution of a project. So next, you want to talk about what their expertise is overall, and most importantly, say what they will do on the project. So in AIM 2, they will oversee immunocytochemistry of mouse brain sections or whatever it is. Like say exactly what they're going to do. For the PI, there's usually some pat line about how they'll oversee all aspects of the project or something like that. But you have to say that. So let's see, did I get all of these things? I think I did. Yeah. So, okay, so does anybody have any questions about that? I think this is one of those things that it seems like a pretty elementary thing, but boy, on a weekly basis, I read summary statements where reviewers say, we don't know what people are doing. Remember that if you're doing a human subjects project, you can shift this to this table to the human subjects form, especially if you're tight on space, you can move it on over into the team description in the human subjects form. For those not doing human subjects projects, you would typically put this at the very beginning of the approach section. So the typical format that I see and that I like to follow is that you might open the approach with an overview paragraph and then a description of the team, and then move on to preliminary data, for example, or generalized methodology that apply to all the aims. So does anybody have any questions pertaining to this, to the how to put together a team table? I'm going to stop share. Okay. All right, so feel free as we go along to type any questions that you have for me. And otherwise, I am going to start reviewing questions that I had from grantees during the week because I'm not seeing any questions coming in from the group. But, you know, as I said, do feel free to pop your questions in there. There are no dumb questions. So let's see. What's the best time to reach out to a program officer? I would say anytime is a good time to reach out, but if you're applying for the cycle 2s, I would definitely reach out now because we're going to start having trouble getting a hold of people as they go on vacation. So I would try to get an email in then and let them know it's in the subject line that it's for an upcoming deadline. Let's see. What is one good thing to do ahead of speaking on the phone with your program officer? So that is a question that I often get from people. And one of the key things that you want to do before you speak to your program officer is you want to do a little legwork in terms of what you think the optimal FOA is and what you think the optimal study section should be. So these prep steps are all spelled out in the preparation portion of my Master the R series, but you probably want to use that search tool that I give in my talk where you look at relevant funding opportunity announcements that are active right now. So you might limit the search based on institute or R01s only or whatever it might be, and come up with a couple of things. It might just be the parent R01 announcement, but you may want to ask them about any specific calls, topic-specific calls that there are. Really importantly, you want to use the CSR ART tool to identify an optimal study section. So for those who don't remember, Center for Scientific Review puts out a tool called the Assisted Referral Tool. So if you just do an internet search on CSR ART, it'll be the first thing that comes up. And you can, into their search windows, you can dump, I think, up to 3 things: your title, your draft aims page, and your draft abstract. And then it'll yield a list of usually somewhere around 2 to 6 different possible study sections that might be a fit for that project. And they're hyperlinked. So you can click into them and look to see how good a match it is. Line up 2 or 3 as options to discuss with your program officer. That would be a really good thing to do ahead of time. Also, make sure you write out your questions and be prepared to take notes on the answers to those questions. So for example, you might have questions about whether or not you're eligible for an extension on your ESI status, or for some people, if they're clinicians or they did a stint in industry, they might be unclear on what their ESI expiration is. So that's another good thing to discuss with your program officer. So I would encourage you to look at the sample email that I have in Master the R Series Part 1 preparation, talking about the questions, what you want to say in an email to get on a call with a program officer. And then I have a list of possible questions you could ask the program officer once you are on the call. Okay, let's see what else. So is it always best to email a program officer to schedule a call, no matter how great a relationship you have with the program officer? So I'm not sure if this person was asking this because they don't have a good relationship with the program officer, but I always feel like it's probably a good idea to at least give it a shot. Try to set up a call with the program officer, because usually your best intelligence gathering will come from a receptive, engaged, interested program officer. So, and definitely on a call rather than an email, because I find that they'll give much more information on a call than they will in an email. Plus, I think it's important when you're on a call with a program officer, not just to hear what they're saying, but hear how they're saying it. So do they sound enthusiastic about the topic, or are they kind of like, like not that enthusiastic about it? And, like if you're calling them to talk about summary statements, that can be really key too, to see what their level of enthusiasm is. So I think it's always a good idea to at least try to set up a call with the program officer. Okay, this is a good one. Each time I receive a summary statement, the summary statements from a grant review over the last 1.5 years through NCI, I get a different program officer listed on the top. How do I establish a relationship when they keep changing on me? That's really hard to do. So this is a problem not just associated with NCI, but often with other institutes as well. Although I do think it's a problem that's worse with the larger institutes, where people tend to shift around a lot. Often with the smaller ones, they tend to stay put a little bit more. But, you can only do what you can do. So, keep contacting the most current program officer. And sometimes if you find a program officer at your institute who is really helpful, just keep going back to that person, even if they're not the exact right person for whatever the FOA is that you're applying for. So for example, if you are a K grantee and you have a great relationship with your program officer at your institute, and you're at the beginning of year 4 in a 5-year K and you're getting ready to apply for your first R01, and you call the R01 PO and they're kind of a dud and they're not giving you a lot of advice, go back to your K program officer and ask their advice about your K to R strategy. So sometimes the right person is not necessarily the one who is the program officer for your FOA. Sometimes the right person is just the one who's responsive. So just do the best you can. I actually in part 1 of Master the R series in preparation, I actually list some strategies that you can use if you have an unresponsive program officer, because it is kind of a common problem. So I would encourage you to check out that list if that's a problem. But otherwise, just do the best you can. That's all you can do. Okay. Oh, and this answers this question. What do you do if your program officer is not responding? Okay, so I guess I'll list some of the strategies there. So some of the things you can do, I tend to, and again, this is all in that prep course, but I tend to email them weekly, especially if you're coming up on the deadline, and be polite but persistent. So just keep saying, sorry to bother you, but I just have a couple of quick things that I want to run by you. Make sure you're indicating time sensitivity in the subject line of the email. Make sure that you're letting them know that you have just a few specific questions that could be answered in a brief phone call. Don't ask the questions in the email, because otherwise the program officer will answer them in the email, but indicate that you've done your due diligence, you just have a few really specific questions and the email will be brief. So sometimes if you're really having trouble getting a hold of a program officer, you might try a different program officer at the same institute. So if it's a small institute and you're trying to get the R01 program officer and there's only 1 or 2, you might email the R21 program officer or a different R01 officer, program officer, and just say, I'm having trouble getting Dr. So-and-so. I don't know if that person's away or out on leave, but I just have a couple of questions. Is there somebody who can answer them? And often that PO will answer them. So these are some of the strategies that I encourage people to use sometimes you just hit a dud and they don't answer, and that's unfortunate. And I've even had people change institutes in that, if that's possible, in those situations. Okay, here is another one. Is it still appropriate to ask the program officer about resubmissions if it has been a while, less than a year since you've gotten the summary statements? So this falls into the category of when is it appropriate to contact your program officer to discuss your summary statements. So in my opinion, it's always appropriate. It doesn't matter when the review occurred. It doesn't matter if it was discussed or not. The program officer is there to give you advice about your grantsmanship strategy. And they are the only person who at NIH who you can ask that information of. The SRO is never going to give you the same level of information that the program officer is. So no matter how long it's been, maybe it's been a year or 2 since you submitted, or maybe your application wasn't discussed. So it's not as if the program officer was sitting in the room at the study section meeting when the application was discussed. Send them the summary statements ahead of time so they have time to quickly read through them and formulate some sort of intelligent response to what they're reading so that they can advise you. But I always think it's a good idea to contact the program officer to discuss your summary statements. So for anybody who is just joining, just a reminder that you can ask me any question you like in the Q&A box. So feel free to type anything in there. We have just a few minutes left. Oh, yeah, and here's same question. If my application was not discussed, can I still have a conversation with the program officer? And the answer is, as I said, yes, absolutely. They're still gonna, even though it wasn't discussed and they weren't in the room during the discussion, they absolutely are a good one is likely to have things to say about that, intelligent things to say about your summary statements. Okay, let's see. Does establishing a good relationship with the program officer potentially yield other benefits besides advice on individual submissions? And that the answer to that is a resounding yes. So that can be difficult to kind of wrap your mind around early in your career because you're really kind of focused on getting advice on that one submission. But in terms of building a relationship with a program officer, my mid-career and senior level applicants who have painstakingly spent time building a relationship with their program officer often reap myriad benefits. So when you're more junior in your career, among the benefits are that that person gets to know who you are, they recognize you, they recognize your work, your project when it's actually being discussed. And if you score in the gray zone, like around the funding line, not comfortably below the funding line, when it comes time for your application to be discussed at the council meeting, the advisory council meeting where the funding decision is made, I used to attend those as a staff writer, and I got to tell you, I've seen program officers absolutely go to the mats for a grantee that they believe in. So if you build a relationship with them and they know you and they believe in you as a grantee, they may be a person who is arguing in favor of your funding, even though you're not really below the funding line. The other thing is there's something called the R56 mechanism, which is short-term funding. You can apply for an R56, but if you apply for an R01, you don't get funded. The program officer has the ability to give you short-term funding. It's usually like 1 to 2 years via the R56 mechanism, which is meant to help an applicant generate more data and publications to come in again and reapply at the R01 level with a more competitive application. And that is solely at the discretion of the program officer. You can't ask for it or apply for it. As you move further into your career, the ideal position to be in is if a program officer calls you to invite you to apply for something. So my more senior people get phone calls from program officers saying, we're coming out with an RFA or a U01 or a U54 or a topic specific center grant application, and I want to see you submit for this. I'm looking for your application. So not only is that a beautiful position to be in because it's such a vote of confidence and they're clearly going to fight for you to get funded at council, it also gives you a heads up that this is happening before the funding opportunity announcement is released. The other thing is that there are lots of study sections that are put together by the program officer. So not everything is reviewed at the Center for Scientific Review. Some things are reviewed like in the Institute at study sections that are put together by the program officers. So that would be like the F series, the fellowships. Sometimes the Ks are, a lot of the topic specific RFAs are, center grant applications, T32s, things like that are typically reviewed in the Institute at study sections put together by the program officers. And you want to be that person who the program officer calls and says, hey, you want to serve on this study section? Because, like it puts you in touch with these program officers. You're working closely with them. You're working closely with other eminences in the field. So there are all kinds of benefits to building a relationship with a program officer. I could go on and on and on about it, but if there's one thing that you take away from my trainings, it's build a relationship with your program officer. It's the single best thing you can do for your NIH funding career. So anyway, we are at time. So I hope you all had a lovely break for Thanksgiving, for those of you who do celebrate it. And otherwise, I will see you guys back here in a couple of weeks. I wish you all the very best of luck in your NIH grant writing, and I'll see you next time. Take care. Bye-bye.